Sometimes the downfall of a career doesn't come with a single blow. Sometimes it unravels slowly, mistake by mistake, until one moment forces the world to stop and take notice. That moment came for Jimmy Kimmel when a single monologue turned late-night laughter into outrage. What was meant as comedy spiraled into controversy, setting off a chain reaction no one saw coming. Networks scrambled, fans revolted, and an old rival, Sylvester Stallone, found himself vindicated in the most unexpected way. This wasn't just another celebrity dust-up. It was the collapse of a late-night empire and the rise of a new order in entertainment. The night seemed ordinary. Just another episode of Jimmy Kimmel Live. But when the host turned his monologue toward the death of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, the atmosphere shifted. Instead of a solemn acknowledgement or respectful distance, Kimmel leaned into sharp political commentary. His words, meant to sting his opponents, struck many as cruelly timed. Families and friends were still mourning. Yet here was a late-night comedian turning grief into a punchline. The laughter from the studio audience sounded thinner than usual, almost nervous. Social media erupted within minutes, with viewers from both left and right asking the same question. Where was the compassion? What should have been a quiet night of jokes and celebrity chatter suddenly became the spark of a storm that would shake late night to its core. The reaction was swift and unforgiving. Viewers across the political spectrum, not just Kirk supporters, called the remarks insensitive and tasteless. Commentators noted that it didn't matter what side of the political divide one stood on. Mocking death felt like a line too far. ABC executives watched in real time as criticism poured across Twitter, Facebook, and news outlets. Overnight, hashtags condemning Kimmel surged into the top trends. Within 24 hours, ABC made an unprecedented move. Jimmy Kimmel Live would be preempted indefinitely. No timeline, no assurance of return. For a show that had stood on the air for over 2 decades, the decision landed like an earthquake. The message was clear. The backlash was bigger than Kimmel, and his network wasn't willing to shield him anymore. The outrage didn't stop at viewers. It spread to the very affiliates that broadcast the show. Nexstar Media Group, one of ABC's most powerful station operators, issued a rare, scathing statement. They declared Kimmel's comments offensive, insensitive, and out of touch with the communities they served. For decades, affiliates had quietly followed network decisions, rarely rebuking their own stars. But this time, the tone was different. They weren't just distancing themselves from a comedian, they were rejecting him. They announced that continuing to air Kimmel was no longer in the public interest. Their words echoed like a verdict, showing just how deep the damage ran. When your own network family turns against you, the writing is already on the wall. In the middle of the chaos, another voice rose, Sylvester Stallone. Years earlier, the actor had clashed with Kimmel in a late-night interview that turned bitter. Kimmel mocked his speech, his films, and even his legacy. Stallone responded with dignity, reminding the audience that comedy should punch up, not down. That moment, once debated, now looked prophetic. Reports resurfaced that Kimmel had even pushed ABC to cancel Stallone's promotional appearance for Tulsa King and the Family Stallone, citing political bias. When Kimmel later mocked him on air, it seemed less like comedy and more like a grudge. Fans remembered, and they drew the line from that night to the present. For Stallone, this was vindication. For Kimmel, it was proof that old wounds never heal, and arrogance eventually catches up. As the backlash against Kimmel grew louder, many began to recall one of Stallone's most powerful lines from his Rocky interview years earlier. Rocky wasn't just a movie. It was hope for the hopeless. That phrase resurfaced online, now echoing louder than ever. Fans rallied around it, contrasting the dignity Stallone had shown in the face of mockery with the cruelty Kimmel displayed in his monologue. Social media transformed into a battlefield, with one side defending Stallone as a symbol of respect and resilience, while the other accused Kimmel of crossing a moral line. Posts poured in. Rocky taught us to never quit. Jimmy taught us to laugh at tragedy. For millions, this wasn't about politics anymore. It was about respect, about a cultural line that had been broken. The more people reflected, the more Stallone's words looked less like a comeback and more like prophecy. The controversy struck deeper than late-night comedy. Commentators revisited an old debate. Does wealth erase struggle? Kimmel had once implied Stallone's wealth made his stories of hardship irrelevant. But Stallone had countered with quiet power. Struggle leaves scars that money cannot erase. That truth now resonated with viewers who felt Kimmel's cruel humor had revealed not wit, but detachment. While Kimmel seemed to trivialize pain, Stallone had always embodied it, carrying his past struggles as a badge of authenticity. Comment threads filled with comparisons. Kimmel makes jokes about loss. Stallone survived it. What had once been a clash of egos on a late-night stage now played out as a referendum on values. Stallone symbolized endurance, while Kimmel looked increasingly like a man who had lost touch with human empathy. Critics quickly joined the chorus, framing Kimmel's downfall not just as an individual mistake, but as a symptom of late night itself. Once, Kimmel's jokes about Stallone's sequels were dismissed as harmless banter. But now those words came back to haunt him. When Stallone declared, "Critics talk, legends build," it had been met with thunderous applause. Today, that statement was everywhere, quoted in articles, posted on memes, printed on fan art. The irony was undeniable. Kimmel, who had mocked Stallone for living in the past, suddenly found his own legacy collapsing before him. Stallone's career had spanned generations, carried by stories of resilience. Kimmel's career, by contrast, was crumbling under the weight of cynicism. The public no longer saw him as a cultural voice. They saw him as an outdated relic, the face of a dying era in television. ABC scrambled to contain the damage. Whispers grew louder about replacements, cancellations, and desperate negotiations. Reports leaked that the network had even reached out to Stallone himself, offering him rare, unrestricted airtime to salvage what was left of Kimmel's credibility. But Stallone refused, uninterested in playing a pawn in damage control. Fans applauded his decision, saying it proved that dignity could not be bought. Meanwhile, inside ABC, the panic was palpable. Producers struggled to book guests, with celebrities quietly backing out of appearances. For the first time in 2 decades, the once unshakable fortress of late-night comedy looked vulnerable. And through it all, one question lingered like smoke. How much longer could Jimmy Kimmel last? When ABC finally pulled the plug and preempted the show, it felt less like a suspension and more like an execution. Kimmel, the man who had mocked others with smug confidence, now found himself at the mercy of the very machine that once protected him. Social media rejoiced, framing it as a symbolic walkout. Not Stallone leaving a stage, but Kimmel being forced off one. Memes compared Stallone's graceful defiance to Kimmel's humiliating silence. Rocky walked out with dignity. Kimmel was dragged out with shame. One viral post read. Across forums and news sites, the message was clear: respect cannot be demanded, it must be earned. And in this moment, Stallone stood taller than ever. While Kimmel disappeared into the shadows of his own downfall, the shockwaves of the scandal spread far beyond ABC. Crew members leaked stories of chaos behind the scenes, while online hashtags like #RespectStallone and #FireKimmel trended for weeks. Celebrities voiced their admiration for Stallone's quiet strength, calling him a true legend who never compromised his values. Media critics declared Kimmel's and not just the failure of a host, but the end of an era for late-night television. Traditional talk shows, once cultural giants, were losing ground to podcasts, YouTube channels, and creators who spoke with authenticity. Stallone's refusal to play the Hollywood game cemented him as more than an actor. He became a symbol of resilience and integrity in a world where both are rare. What began as one man's misstep had turned into a cultural reckoning. And in the end, the last laugh belonged not to Jimmy Kimmel, but to Sylvester Stallone, who proved that dignity, once tested, can outlast even the loudest noise of mockery.